Have you ever wondered why so many women pretend to enjoy intimacy, even when they don't feel a thing? I see it every week in my clinic. Men who love deeply, who try so hard, yet quietly ask me the same question, "Doctor, why can't I satisfy her?" The truth is painful, but it's not because you're broken or because she stopped caring. It's because no one ever taught you what truly turns a woman on not just her body, but her mind, her emotions, her sense of safety. Most men were told to focus on performance, not connection. They learned to rush to chase, to prove, and somewhere along the way, they lost the language of touch rhythm and trust that every woman's body understands instinctively. I'm Dr. Fiona Gray, a sexual health physician who spent over 15 years studying female arousal and coaching couples to rebuild desire from the ground up. In this video, I'll show you what I've seen work, the real respectful art of giving oral pleasure based on science, clinical experience, and the honest voices of women themselves. Because when you understand her body, the way I've seen my patients rediscover it, pleasure stops being pressure and becomes connection. Most men think pleasure starts with technique, but from what I've seen after years in practice, real pleasure doesn't begin with your tongue or your hands. It begins in your mind, and hers. The biggest mistake I see is that men approach intimacy like a performance. They think they have to prove something to last longer, to move faster, to be perfect. But here's the truth. No woman feels safe or turned on when she senses pressure instead of presence. In every consultation, when I ask women what makes them feel deeply desired, their answers are never about tricks. They talk about connection, about feeling seen, not judged. There's even neuroscience behind it. Research from Rutgers University shows that when a woman feels emotionally safe, her brain releases oxytocin, which amplifies arousal and sensitivity in the pelvic nerves by up to 40%. Safety isn't just emotional, it's biological. So before touch ever happens, her nervous system is already deciding, can I relax with him? Can I let go? If the answer is no, nothing you do physically will feel right. But when the answer is yes, even the simplest movement can feel electric. That's why I tell my male patients, this stop chasing performance, start creating presence. Slow your breathing. Watch her breathing. When you mirror calm energy, you tell her body you're safe here. And that's when her arousal begins to bloom, not from force, but from trust. Because once a woman's body feels safe, everything else you do will multiply in power. And that's exactly what we'll build on next, the way to create that sense of safety before you ever touch her. When her body feels safe, everything changes. But safety doesn't happen by accident. It's something you create. And this is where most men underestimate their power. I've seen it hundreds of times in my clinic couples who love each other deeply. But the woman's body shuts down during intimacy. She's not cold. She's not disinterested. She's simply not relaxed enough to receive pleasure. The body can't open when the mind is still guarding the door. In one study from the University of British Columbia, researchers found that stress hormones like cortisol directly block blood flow to the clitoral region. In simple terms, if she feels even slightly anxious, her body literally turns down its own pleasure response. That's why comfort isn't optional. It's the foundation of arousal. So how do you build it? Start long before the bedroom. It's in your tone, your patience, your respect. It's the way you touch her hand, the way you breathe, the way you make her laugh. Every small gesture tells her nervous system whether to tighten or to soften. In the moment, it's not about jumping in, it's about slowing down. I always tell my patients, make the space warm, dim the lights, silence distractions, let your energy say, there's no rush, you're safe. Because the slower you go, the faster her trust grows. And when that trust locks in, something beautiful happens. Her body begins to respond without resistance. You'll feel her breathing change, her muscles loosen, her presence deepen. That's not just relaxation, that's her saying yes, even before words. And once you've built that foundation of safety, that's when you can start awakening her body, not with force, but with anticipation. And that's exactly what we'll talk about next. Once safety is established, the real art begins. Because when her body finally relaxes, that's when you can start building desire, not by going straight to her most sensitive spot, but by awakening the rest of her first. Most men focus on one destination. What they miss is that a woman's pleasure is a journey. The wider the map you explore, the deeper the response becomes. I've seen this over and over during therapy sessions. A couple comes in saying she can't feel much anymore, and after a few sessions of slowing down, expanding touch, and rediscovering forgotten zones, suddenly her body starts to respond again. That's not magic. That's neurology. Research from the Journal of Sexual Medicine found that stimulation of non-genital areas like the back, neck, and inner arms lights up the same regions of the brain that activate during orgasm. In other words, arousal isn't local. It's networked. When you treat her body like a landscape instead of a target, everything connects. So start far. A gentle kiss on her shoulder, your hand tracing her back, a slow exhale against her skin. Think of it as charging her body with anticipation. The goal isn't to rush forward. It's to build tension so deeply that by the time you reach the center, her body is already humming with energy. You can even use pauses. Silence can be louder than sound. Pull back. Let her breathe. Let her body crave the next touch. That's the moment when her brain floods with dopamine and oxytocin, amplifying every sensation that follows. And here's the part most men never realize. The best pleasure doesn't come from constant motion. It comes from rhythm patience and the spaces in between, because those spaces are where anticipation turns into desire. And once that anticipation peaks, that's when you begin your approach, the part that most men rush, but where everything truly begins. By the time her body is humming with anticipation, that's when the real connection begins. But this is also where most men lose it. They rush. They confuse readiness with invitation. And that's the moment everything unravels. I've seen it countless times in couples who come to me frustrated. He means, well, he cares deeply, but he moves too fast and her body instantly retreats. What most people don't realize is that arousal isn't a switch, it's a wave. If you crash into it too hard, it breaks early. If you guide it gently, it grows stronger. In physiology, this is called sensory entrainment. The body synchronizes to rhythm, not pressure. Studies from the Kinsey Institute show that women reach deeper states of arousal when stimulation starts light and consistent, then gradually builds rather than starting intense. That's why soft first is not hesitation, it's intelligence. When I coach patients, I tell them to think of the first contact like tracing a secret, not searching for a button. Begin around not on. Let your lips or tongue wander the outer areas, the labia, the thighs, the soft space between breath and touch. Each stroke is a message: you're safe, you're wanted, I'm here. You'll see her body guide you, a deeper breath, a subtle movement, a quiet sound. Those are signals, not background noise. Follow them. If she pulls closer, stay there. If she tenses, is ease back. This is not about control. It's about listening with your senses, because when a woman feels that you're truly reading her cues, her body begins to trust you completely. And when that trust turns into surrender, that's when rhythm takes over the moment where connection becomes chemistry. But that rhythm has its own rules. And understanding them is what separates friction from fireworks. That rhythm I mentioned, it's everything. It's the language her body speaks when words disappear. When men understand rhythm, everything changes. When they don't, pleasure collapses under pressure. I've seen it in therapy rooms more times than I can count. One partner tries harder, faster thinking, more movement means more pleasure, but her body quietly shuts down. The truth is, the female nervous system doesn't crave speed, it craves synchronization. Science backs this up. A 2023 study from the University of Sussex used thermal imaging to track arousal patterns in women. The results were striking when stimulation followed a steady, predictable rhythm blood flow, and sensitivity increased by over 60%, but when the rhythm became erratic, the body's arousal curve dropped almost instantly. Consistency builds trust. Trust builds pleasure. I often tell my male patients, think of rhythm like breathing together. When your movements match her pace, you create resonance, a shared rhythm where her body starts to guide you. If she moans or exhales in sync, stay exactly there. That's the sweet spot. Don't switch patterns every few seconds. That confuses the nervous system. Slight pressure changes are fine, but the pattern itself is sacred. And here's something subtle but powerful: use stillness. Sometimes pausing for a heartbeat amplifies the next movement tenfold. Her body leans into the silence, anticipating the return. That's dopamine in action, heightening reward circuits. When you treat rhythm as communication, not choreography, every sense sharpens. You stop performing and start attuning. That's when intimacy transforms from effort into flow. Because once you master her rhythm, you're no longer doing pleasure, you're translating it. And when you can translate it, you're ready for the moment that truly matters. The point where climax stops being an ending and becomes an opening. When rhythm turns into resonance, that's when the body starts speaking its loudest truth. She's close. But here's where so many men panic. They sense her rising, and instead of holding steady, they speed up, tighten up, or change what was working, and instantly that beautiful buildup collapses. I've heard this story from countless couples. She was right there, and then it was gone. It's not because she couldn't climax, it's because the connection was lost right before the finish line. In neuroscience, we call this the consistency threshold. The female body needs about 30 to 90 seconds of continuous familiar stimulation for climax to lock in. But every time you switch pattern pressure or rhythm, her brain resets that countdown. Think of it like tuning a frequency. Stay on the same signal long enough and the whole system aligns. What I tell my patients is simple. When you feel her body tense in pleasure, that's not a signal to do more. It's a cue to stay right there. Same rhythm, same pace. Let the wave crest on its own. Watch her breathing, her sounds, her movements. They'll tell you exactly where she is. The goal isn't to force the finish. It's to hold the moment open until her body decides it's ready. And when that release finally happens, don't pull away immediately. For many women, sensitivity spikes right after climax. What was pleasure a second ago can turn sharp or overwhelming. Ease off slowly, switch to broader, lighter touch, or simply rest your hand. It tells her nervous system, you're safe, it's okay to land. Because the afterglow is not just recovery, it's connection deepening. And knowing how to care for her in that moment will lead us into something most men never think about: what happens after pleasure when the body still craves closeness more than stimulation. Right after climax, the body isn't done speaking, it's whispering. The heartbeat slows, the breath deepens, and in that fragile space, connection can either bloom or quietly fade. This is the part most men overlook. They think the finish line is the orgasm. But for women, what happens after often decides whether she feels loved or simply used. I've heard it from patients over and over again. He just rolled away. He didn't mean to hurt me, but it felt empty. Physiologically, this moment matters more than most realize. Right after release, a woman's body floods with oxytocin, the bonding hormone. In studies from Stanford and Emory couples who stayed physically close in the first 5 minutes after sex, showed up to 50% higher satisfaction and emotional connection scores. Oxytocin doesn't just create warmth. It cements memory. It teaches her nervous system, this is safe, this is love, so linger, breathe together, offer water, touch her hair, hold her. Don't rush for your phone or the bathroom. The simplest gestures, a gentle kiss on the forehead, a whispered, "You're okay," tell her body the experience wasn't just physical, it was emotional. I tell every man I counsel, aftercare is foreplay for the next time. It's how you teach her to trust that every encounter with you ends in comfort, not confusion. That trust builds anticipation, and anticipation builds desire. Because when she associates pleasure with safety, her body remembers and it wants to return. And that memory is what turns ordinary intimacy into something unforgettable. And here's the part most people never expect. Sometimes the deepest transformation doesn't happen during pleasure, but in the quiet moments right after when connection turns into commitment. So let's bring it all together. Real intimacy isn't about tricks or performance. It's about presence, patience, and trust. Everything I've shared with you today, from creating safety to rhythm to aftercare, comes down to one truth. The most powerful thing you can give a woman isn't stimulation. It's understanding when she feels that when her body and mind both say, "I'm safe here," that's when pleasure becomes effortless. Remember, confidence doesn't come from knowing every move. It comes from caring enough to listen. I've seen it time and again in my patients' men who stop performing and start connecting, suddenly transform their relationships. They communicate better, they feel calmer, and yes, their physical performance improves naturally. Because when you master connection, your body follows. If today's message helped you see intimacy differently, I want you to do one thing. Don't just scroll away. Save this video so you can come back to it, reflect, and maybe even share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because healthy intimacy doesn't just improve your sex life, it strengthens your heart, your confidence, and your overall well-being. And if you want more science-based, honest guidance about men's health energy and sexual vitality, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the latest insights I share each week. Now tell me in the comments what part of today's video resonated with you the most. The science, the mindset, or the emotional side? I'd love to know your thoughts. Take care of your body, respect your partner, and remember, great health and great intimacy always start with awareness.